Let's talk about the missed potential of Warlords of Draenor. Now first I want to be clear, the dungeons in this expansion are fantastic, the raids are fantastic, and the zones are beautiful. So you might be wondering, well, why the hell does this video even exist then? Well, the answer to that is that the video is about missed potential, and based on playing the game throughout the alpha and beta testing process, and, how it feels on live, it kind of seems to me that Warlords of Draenor may fall a little bit short of what it could have been in a few different regards. Now, it's a pretty easy point to make for nearly any expansion. After all, coming up with hypothetical good stuff is pretty easy. Still, I think that Warlords of Draenor has actually crossed a bit of a threshold in terms of missed potential, to the point where I think it's now worth talking about. Often I find myself sitting around with little of quality to do, just thinking about how damn cool the world of Draenor is, and how I've been given, in the game anyway, so little of a reason to care about it. The art team has done wonders with this expansion, and perhaps it seems like their hard work is being squandered. This expansion is based on the idea of an alternate timeline. Well, perhaps there's an alternate timeline of our history, one in which Warlords of Draenor was a 3-raid tier long, 2-year expansion, i.e. what they had fully planned at BlizzCon with Trial of the Gladiator, movable garrisons, the full works, Farallon, Tanaan at launch, and perhaps not the expansion that we have now, which seems to quite literally have been the result of them cutting loads of things during the early testing process. Number 10. First on the chopping block is Rathore City. This is a place with a long history and it's extremely iconic. Yet, here we are sitting at max level, and it's pretty much of no relevance. Yes, there are Apexis Crystal Dailies, but seriously, who cares about them at this stage? And actually, I will cover them a little bit later, but even when they were relevant, they were just a very unfun mob grind. So what could they have done with Rathore City? Well, I suppose the most obvious thing relates to its past as a, city. Having a plotline where players retake the city and get to use it afterwards could have made for a pretty epic series of quests and storytelling. Alternatively, it could have had a dungeon, or even two, located inside it. Yes, the Warlords of Draenor dungeons are fantastic, but I think the expansion could have done with a few more of them, and a dungeon set within the siege of Shattrath, or the initial fall of the city at the hands of the Iron Horde, would have been truly just badass as hell. Yet, unfortunately, we didn't really get that. Now, there was also a lot of talk about Shattrath being a raid back in the days of the beta. This likely wouldn't fit into the way the expansion is currently trending. I mean, 6.2 is going to pretty much deal with the Iron Horde, and without going into spoilers, a lot of the Legion stuff as well. Still though, it is one of the places that's so large and impressive that it would certainly befit a raid. Plus, having a raid located in a place where people already have a bit of an emotional attachment to could have went down really well with Shattrath. I suppose my main point is that with this city, they constructed a truly impressive area, and then they went on to do very, very little with it. Number 9. Next, let's hop over to a perhaps smaller topic, and this is garrison invasions. When you think of a siege, what springs to mind? A reductive time trial about killing things quickly, or a struggle where you've got to fight tooth and nail to survive? As far as I'm concerned, the sort of dynamic they should have been shooting for in terms of the feel of garrison invasions was the latter, and certainly not this bizarre time trial idea. That makes sense in a challenge mode dungeon, but not in you defending your garrison. It seems so strange. If you're making anything about being a base being attacked in this way, what you want to be doing is just channeling the vibe of, say, Helm's Deep or Minas Tirith or any of the countless really just memorable sieges from popular culture. Invasions, I think, should have been properly hard, and they should have involved mobs that challenge you. Instead of bronze, silver, and gold invasions, they could have just used the raid difficulties of normal, heroic, and mythic, and then made it so that the invasions were a true challenge where you felt like you actually deserved a reward. The raid and 645 follower missions would have meant that perhaps non-raiders would be able to get enough gear to get the initial garrison invasions on normal difficulty, but I'd have it so that a mythic garrison invasion, that's something where you needed really good gear for, because I think that would have added a good bit of top end to the game. Imagine if you had mythic dungeons combined with that, combined with a little bit of normal raids. I think that would have made a more varied style of endgame in some ways. Number 8. And back onto the topic of really big things, let's talk about cities. Like Shattrath, Bladespire, and Karabor are truly stunning bits of world design. The art direction is tremendously strong, and you've just got to hand it to the really talented people who created those zones. And then you've got to scorn the designers who underutilized such magnificent bits of work. Simply put, these should have been cities. There really is not a great deal more to say than that. Like Dalaran and, say, Shattrath, I think these could have been really impressive and memorable places. Certainly, they would have been a bit more interesting in terms of scale and grandeur than our bloody garrisons, which we've been, well, stuck in for a while. Now, Blizzard did say that making them into playable cities would have been challenging. As far as I'm concerned, that's their job, and they shouldn't be the ones to shy away from challenge. Yes, Karabor is large, but you could get around the issue of its size by having most of the important stuff located in the interior of the structure, and then having exits from the interior of Karabor to the various gardens, the harbour and the sides of the city, which would have cut down on running time. Hell, you could even have 2 or 3 different inn locations, so that people could have a preferred Hearthstone location. It would have worked. It definitely would have worked. As for Bladespire, well, it wouldn't have been too bad providing there was ample stairs, multiple routes, and things like that. Also, they were not against the idea of a run speed boost in Mists of Pandaria with the Veiled cities, so why not use one here to help people get around the place? Number 7. Next, it's time to do Ashrun, and the next 2 points in this video are actually going to be aimed at the PvP community. Though let's start with Ashrun and its complete lost potential. First, I suppose the general, crapness of Ashrun is essentially the elephant of the room here. Back in the beta, many of us provided feedback and said, this is how Ashrun's going to turn out. And lo and behold, we were right. The one thing in the beta that we maybe didn't call was the whole queue issue. Though I suppose overall I can be a little bit smug for calling all of the fundamental issues of Ashrun back in the beta period. It really is a pity that Blizzard didn't listen to the myriad of testers who just said, hey guys, you've got so many problems here. Anyway, the most clear waste of potential is of course how the live version of Ashrun was cocked up. Rewards don't make sense, they are poorly located, and they have even in the past supported win trading and things like that. Then there's also the queue issues and many other things. Since launch, they've been throwing hotfixes all over the place, with some stuff working and maybe some stuff missing the mark. Fundamentally, I think that Ashrun does have potential, though. I would have loved it if we had, say, a Winter Grasp style battle over a central keep every 2.5 hours, with then the current style of gameplay existing in the interim period between the keep, and then of course whatever faction owned that keep, and then the opposite faction's Ashrun main base. Imagine that Ashrun was maybe twice as long as it currently is, with a big fort in the middle, and you have a Winter Grasp over that fort every 2.5 hours. It would have meant there would have been some stuff that would have had, say, server-wide consequence that people would have cared about. I delved into this a lot more during the beta, and as much as there are a myriad of problems which may pop into your head with that idea, I'm pretty sure my design did solve quite a few of them. I'll throw a link to that video in the description. Number 6. And next we've got Battlegrounds and Arenas. It is a simple point to make. There were none of them. It's so much lost potential. And most, I think, air quotes, proper PvP is done in Battlegrounds and Arenas, yet it's something that was wholly neglected. For many, the fun of PvP is the battle of strategy, reaction time, and wits between players, yet the Zerg nature of Ashrun combat, by design, precludes that from happening. There are loads of arenas scattered throughout the land, and the actual world of Draenor is just so large and detailed that I find it very hard to imagine that they couldn't have thought of a good battleground. I mean, hell, they could have had one in the sort of Foundry Docks area where you could have been dealing with like flame pits and stuff. They really could have done a lot. And on the topic of Battlegrounds, I would love it if they tried to innovate and just make some really new feeling stuff. I remember in Star Wars The Old Republic, the hot ball game type. That was so cool. It was in an arena where you had like, pits of fire and spikes. It felt really nice. Maybe they could revolutionize or add in 1 or 2 Battlegrounds and really revamp the formula. Of course, also, it's been 2.5 years since we last got an arena, and nearly 2 since a new Battleground. I think that, because the PvP communities maybe somewhere between 20 and 35, maybe 40% of the player base, it seems a little bit insane that they've been left without new shiny stuff for so long, other than, of course, Ashrun, but that's already been covered. Number 5. Next, let's talk about Farallon and the small island. Back in the alpha and the early beta, Farallon was there, and on the world map, and also there was a small island to the west. Blizzard, though, removed them on the world map, saying that they didn't want to hype up the existence of these things when they weren't sure if they would deliver, which I suppose is fair enough given their record with this expansion, but certainly it seems unlikely that we will see either of these things. I'm not going to give you any spoilers here, but judging on the plot leading into patch 6.2, we'll be knocking out the remnants of the Iron Horde and the Burning Legion stuff, which doesn't leave much narrative room for things like Farallon, which honestly would have been the perfect middle of the expansion raid tier, similar to perhaps the Isle of Thunder. Again, we come back to the idea of missed potential. These locations could have been in the expansion, and it just feels like Blizzard are perhaps rushing through Draenor and missing out on much of the stuff that could have been really great. Number 4. And next we've got reputations. So the reputations, I think in this expansion, are by far some of the worst in the game. That's a big statement, but I think most of the other expansions provided reputation content that was better and of a higher quality. Xiaohao was a grueling rep grind for a pretty special amount, a one-off tribute to how some reps were done back in vanilla. Should every reputation be that? Hell no. I mean, in 5.0, 5.1, and 5.2, Blizzard proved that via reps they could provide interesting story content. Yes, even if that means a few dailies. But let's not forget, the big issue of patch 5.0 was the perceived need to do dailies for player power, so as long as that's fixed, it should be okay. And I would say that the Apexis dailies are arguably worse bits of content overall. The Shatari defense feels like the most squandered of the lot. This is a faction that's defending the capital city of the Draenei from the ultimate evil of the Warcraft universe. And they make it a mob grind with no story. Seriously guys, what the hell? Here's what you do, throw in a weekly quest, a few dailies, and a bunch of patch 5.3 style events. That way you've got a story, you've got dailies, and you've got dynamic events to make the whole thing feel like a war. It would of course be best to remove the trading post requirement and make it available to both factions. Do that right and you've got a really interesting rep. That's just one example, but a similar idea could be applied to pretty much every rep in this expansion. This expansion is also a regression in terms of the number of reps on offer. So here's an idea for 2 new mount-related ones. You could put the Dracorium there, in Shadowmoon Valley. That's where they rear Fey Dragons, so it would have made a lot of sense for that to be perhaps the Warlords of Draenor equivalent to the Order of the Cloud Serpent. And the Horde could have had something with Rylax. Or, they could just be store mounts, and that content could not be in the game. Fair enough. Number 3. Next, let's quickly tackle the Garrison Campaign. I think it definitely had its highs, but if we face the truth here, most of the quests were filler. It feels like they developed a few really good ones, like the main Iron Horde focused ones and the Trial of the Exarchs, but the rest were basically just glorified Apexis dailies. This was really disappointing considering that it's the same people who made the patch 5.1 quests, in which each quest felt like a major progression of a single storyline. So I think if they just refocus around the strengths of 5.1, then they should have a better Garrison campaign in the future. Number 2. And next we've got the topic of Apexis dailies. These are strange things. They were supposed to be set in Timeless Isle styled locations, and they were supposed to offer true freedom in how you tackle them. That sounds great on paper, but I think much has been lost in translation to the in-game content. The core gameplay, no matter what zone you're in, comes down to killing mobs to fill up a bar. A bit of that would be fine, but nearly all of the world content in this expansion involves killing mobs to fill up some sort of bar, whether it's the Apexis one, or maybe a rep bar. If you take a reductive outlook, then you could argue that nearly all content is just that, but by doing that, you'd be ignoring context. Creative use of the same core mechanics can lead to a vast range of content that most importantly, just feels different to players, and they haven't done it in this expansion. First of all, I would not mind having some actual quests to do in these zones. Perhaps there could be a different set of quests per zone, which could lead to more variety. Also, a bit more of the patch 5.3 and 5.4 styled events, I think would have been good. The Timeless Isle didn't feel dynamic, but I think it was a hell of a lot better than what we have this time around. Also, I suppose Apexis dailies would have been far more palatable if there was other stuff to do in the world. For an example, good quality reps that would feature a different sort of core gameplay aesthetic to what goes on in the Apexis dailies. Number 1. And next we've got patch 6.1. The problems of 6.0 could have been solved, and 6.1 was their really big opportunity. Unfortunately, they just completely squandered it. The Harrison Jones quests are fine. The raid and dungeon quests are just sending us some content that we've already done. The Garrison raid bosses seem to be something that nobody cares about, with, BRF LFR gear offering 655 and 660 gear, and Garrison missions also giving raid gear. Patch 6.1 needed quest and story-related content, similar to, say, 5.1. And apparently what they had, going on in the Iron Docks was only a quest or two, but still, I think my point stands. Heal vs. Babyface actually recently did a really good video about patch 6.1, and the point that really resonated with me was Kilrog Deadeye. Minor spoilers, but let's just say he's going to be a major player in patch 6.2. He's not been involved in the story since the initial Tanan Jungle experience, so patch 6.1 would have been the perfect time to just give us some content involving him. Certainly they could have extended the Garrison Campaign into 6.1 and added a new questline that involved that character, so that when he comes into prominence in patch 6.2, we would actually have a little bit more context and understanding about who he is, why he hates us, and why ultimately we want to kill him. That stuff, I think, would have worked a lot better than what they did. And that's pretty much it for the video. I just wanted to get this stuff off my chest mainly, and hopefully here and there offer a few different, more constructive solutions to some of the problems. Hopefully stuff does get better as the expansion goes on, and certainly patch 6.2 has, well, A, got a lot to live up to, but B, it does look like it could have some really fun content based on the lower context of the patch. So hopefully the future ends up being quite a bit better than the last maybe month or two. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.